Imagine if you could read your partner's mind, understand their every need and desire without them saying a thing. Well, that's sort of what this communication hack does, and you can implement it today to improve your relationship. So if you've got constant arguments happening, you've lost that appreciation, intimacy, or sex, or you just live in a lifeless marriage, then you're gonna wanna implement this hack right away. And there are 5 steps that I'm gonna walk you through on how you can do that right now. These simple steps have allowed me to fix my marriage, keep my family together, and have a wife that looks at me with appreciation, desire, and respect. And I've used them with over 5,000 other men. If you don't know who I am, my name's Tony Versick. I'm the founder of the Empowered Man Movement, and we help men fix their marriages, reconnect with their children, and find work-life balance. So let's get stuck into what these 5 steps are and how you can use this communication hack to improve your relationships. The first step of this communication hack, or the hack itself, is this idea of feedback. We're constantly getting feedback from everyone in our life, including ourselves. And in our marriage or relationship, that feedback comes in many different forms. Now, if we break these forms down into the 2 key forms, they are verbal and non-verbal feedback. So if we're arguing with our partner, if we're not having enough sex, if we don't feel like we're getting the appreciation or respect we want, that's either going to be given in the form of verbal feedback or non-verbal feedback. Let me explain each of these and how you can actually fix them and how the hack allows you to turn this around. Verbal feedback is when our partner says with their language what they're upset or angry about. And it's done with the words that they use, as well as the tonality of those words. Let me give you an example. If I ask my wife if everything's okay after a long day, we haven't been intimate for a few weeks, and I say, babe, is everything okay? And she says, I'm fine. The word she used was, I'm fine, and the tonality was, I'm fine. Now she could also say, I'm fine, babe. Same words, different tonality, and that's a form of verbal feedback. The way that we say something and what we say is constantly giving us feedback. Now, we both know that as a man, if your partner says, I'm fine, in that tonality with those words, the combination of the 2, that things definitely aren't fine. And that is now feedback that something is wrong, which is where so many men hear that feedback and lose our shit or get triggered and go, why are you not telling me what's going on? And we lose our control. The second type of feedback that we get to have awareness on is non-verbal feedback. Non-verbal feedback is when our partner gives us a dirty look. Their facial expressions are like, they look at us dirty. If you've ever looked in the direction of another woman with your partner around and she's a jealous type, you know exactly what I'm talking about. They look at you with disgust and judgment. There's also non-verbal feedback in the forms of our body language, right? If our partner is reserved or away from us or not holding our hand or being intimate with us, that is a form of body language. If they're closed off around us as well, they don't feel that connection physically. Another form of non-verbal feedback is a lack of love. You're not feeling loved by your partner. You're not feeling appreciated for all the hard work you do. You're not feeling supported in the household or that family nucleus. You're not feeling understood. You feel like your partner doesn't understand you, or you don't feel respected. These are all examples of non-verbal feedback. They don't need to say something for you to feel like you're lacking love, appreciation, support, understanding, or respect. And one of the biggest forms of non-verbal feedback is a breakdown in connection. If you're lacking intimacy, you're lacking sex, you're sleeping at opposite beds or in different beds or opposite sides of the couch, you're separated from each other, you're disconnected, that is a form of non-verbal feedback. So to understand this communication hack is really to understand that you're constantly getting feedback from your partner. If you have a great marriage, you're communicating well, you're having sex, you're connected, you're loved, you're appreciated, you're supported, you're understood, you're respected, that is feedback that things are going well. And if you're lacking any of those things, then you're currently receiving verbal and non-verbal feedback telling you that something needs to change. This happened to me for years. I swept that feedback under the rug, and despite being successful and making money, my partner came home and said, I don't love you anymore, and the relationship ended overnight. And these same issues crept into my current marriage with my wife, Rosie. Now, we have a child together, and I don't want that marriage to end. So if you're experiencing any of these forms of feedback, your partner's telling you things she's unhappy with, she's using a shitty tone of voice, or non-verbally, her body language, her facial expressions, you're not feeling those things you deserve as a man, then that is all a form of feedback. And the communication hack is, how do we take that feedback and upgrade that relationship, which we're going to get into with the next 4 steps. Now, this is where the hack part comes into this. And the second step here is understanding what is that person's story and what is them causing them to give you that feedback. So if my wife doesn't want to have sex with me, or my wife doesn't make me feel understood, or my wife is angry at me or yelling or using a shitty tone of voice, if she's giving me negative feedback, then you can guarantee that she has a story about me and a story about our relationship. Her story could be, he works too much. He never wants to communicate with me, and when I ask him how his day is, he just grunts. Her story might be, when we first got together, it was fun and it was exciting, and now he's always stressed and he drinks every single night. You can be damn sure there's a story going on, and you can be damn sure attached to that story is a perception of you as a man. Your partner sees you in a certain way. And you can be damn sure if you're getting negative feedback, they see you in a negative light. They don't see you as a hero. They don't see you as a leader. They don't see you as strong or confident or assertive or certain or the man they fell in love with. They see you as something less than. And with that story about how they see you, and with that story about how you're showing up, they also start to feel emotions. As a woman, this happens in our teams as well. If someone feels like they can't trust you, they feel uncertain, they feel angry with you, they feel upset at you, they feel hurt by how you're showing up, that story combined with those emotions, that language in their head, thoughts, and the emotions about you, they start to build up and fester inside of that person. And when that happens, that creates a disconnection in the relationship. So the first step is understanding that you're constantly getting verbal and non-verbal feedback from your partner. It's also in your business or career, you're constantly getting feedback from everyone verbally and non-verbally. The second step is bringing awareness to what could be causing that feedback. What is this person's story? How do they perceive me? And also, what are they feeling? You see, when I was upset at my wife, I was blaming her for the lack of sex, the lack of intimacy, the lack of connection. My story, because we have them too, was I'm working hard, I'm busting my balls, the house is a mess, you don't care, you don't want to be intimate, fuck you. That's my story. And I feel anger, I feel frustration, I'm blaming her. Instead, what I got to do was find out what was her story. And the thing is, we don't know. We're playing this guessing game where we assume our partner's happy, we assume that things are going well. But if you're not intimate, you're arguing, you're disconnected, you're not connected, then you can guarantee things aren't going well and there's a negative story. So the second step is really just asking yourself, what is that person's story? What is my wife thinking? What is she feeling? And you can write this down, but to take it a step further, you can ask, hey, I've noticed that you're giving me this feedback. I've noticed that you don't seem super happy. I've noticed that we're arguing more. I've noticed that you're upset at me. I've noticed that we're yelling at each other. Help me understand. It's such a powerful frame. Help me understand. What am I missing here? Help me understand. What are you thinking? How are you feeling? I want to understand you better. And just by getting clarity on what they're thinking and feeling, you can now understand why that negative feedback is coming your way and why you're lacking the things you deserve inside of that relationship. This is where the third step comes in once you understand your partner or wife's story, and that is this idea of extreme ownership. It's asking yourself, what is my role in this situation? Now, it is perfectly reasonable to be upset with your partner for giving you negative feedback. If their story is you work too much and you're never around and all the stuff that affects your ego, you're allowed to get upset and triggered. But that's not going to get you to the outcome that you want, which is more connection and positive feedback. Positive feedback loops, more sex, more intimacy. You get to ask yourself, what is my role in this situation? We talked about this in our previous podcast episode, if you want to go check it out after this. It's saying, cool, what have I done to get this feedback? Doesn't mean she's blameless, doesn't mean she doesn't have a role to play. It's asking yourself, how have I changed things? What am I not doing that my partner wants? What am I doing that's making the relationship worse? When Rosie and I were disconnected, my story was, because I had one too, I'm working hard, I'm making money, what more do you want from me? What I failed to see was that we had stopped going on date nights. I was working way more hours. As we scaled the business revenue and the income, I also spent less quality time with my partner. I worked longer hours, I worked later nights. I stopped helping out with bath time and our daughter at the end of the day. So I dropped all these standards, which meant I was not taking responsibility. Then when she started giving me negative feedback and building a story about Tony works too much, Tony's stressed, Tony drinks too much, I blamed her instead of listening to the fucking feedback. Instead, what I decided to do was take extreme ownership of my role in the situation and ask myself, what can I change? What can I improve here? What can I do so my wife feels loved, appreciated, supported, understood, and respected? Despite the fact that I work hard, despite the fact that I'm under stress, I still get to give her what she wants and fill her cup and make her feel loved and make her feel supported. And that took a lot of ownership. And as men, that's unfair, but that's the game we get to play. So if you're getting negative feedback and you understand the story and the emotions of that person who's giving it to you, the next step is to ask yourself, what's my role in the situation? How have I contributed to this? Not what is she doing wrong and what is she not giving me? What can I take ownership of? And that level of extreme ownership allows you to get to the next stage, which is extremely important. And that's having a conversation about your realizations and actually moving forward together. This is the fourth step in this communication hack, and that's having a conversation. This is something so many of us struggle to do, and it is something we will struggle to do until we practice it and get enough repetitions in it. I want you to think about an area of your life where you are good at communicating. For a lot of our Empowered Man clients, we've coached over 5,000. They've got some of them 200, 300, 1,200 employees, and they're really good at communicating at work. They're good at being a manager or a business owner or a leader when it comes to business, but when it comes to home life, that communication slips. And that's because we haven't done enough repetitions of conversation. So once you're aware of the feedback, verbal and non-verbal, from your partner, that makes you realize the relationship isn't where you want it to be, then you find out what's their story, what are they feeling? You take ownership of your role in the situation. The fourth step is to have a conversation about it. It's to actually say, hey, I've noticed this feedback you're giving me. You seem upset. You seem like you're triggered. We're not communicating as well as we used to be. I'd love to know more about what you're thinking. What are you feeling? I want to understand. Help me understand what's going on in our relationship. How are you feeling? What am I missing? And then you explain the things you can take ownership for. Well, look, my role in this situation is I'm working way more hours. I'm not spending as much time with you. I'm sacrificing time with my family to build the business. I'm not as romantic as I used to be. And you literally rattle off all the things that you know you've dropped the ball on, and you can be damn sure you know they're thinking and feeling as well. And this takes so much courage as a man to put aside your ego and go, you know what, this is my role in the situation. And not just to realize that yourself, but to communicate it with that person. When Rosie and I had this conversation, it was really difficult because I explained to her, I'm like, in my head, my story is I'm working hard, you've got everything you want, but she's upset. We're not having sex, we're not intimate. So I said to her, I'm like, look, I've seen recently that things aren't going great. And I love you and I don't want this to end. Help me understand what's going on for you. And she told me all the things she was unhappy about with me and how she felt about me, and it fucking hurt. And I had to sit there being told that as a man, even though I'm doing my fucking best, it's not enough. And instead of letting my ego get in the way and reacting, I had to just go, fair enough. I can see your perspective. I understand why you'd feel that way. And then I chose to say, okay, cool. Well, I've heard everything you've said. I'm going to take ownership for my role in the situation. And these are the things I've noticed about myself that need to change. I do work too much. I do drink too much. I am being a victim. I am getting angry after a long day. These are things that I get to take ownership for. And her seeing me do that, it didn't change things right away, but it got her to go, fuck, he actually gets it. He actually understands. Because if we don't stay on the same page and she doesn't feel understood and I don't feel understood, we're gonna separate. This is why divorces happen. And the argument here might be, well, why do you need to understand her? She needs to understand you. She will, once you actually level up and lead. And this is where ownership, which we talked about previously, is so important. What can you take ownership for in the conversation? And then step 4, how can you communicate that with your partner? It's gonna be fucking hard. It's gonna be challenging, which is exactly why you get to do it, because it's only hard because you've never fucking done this before. But consider this, if you don't learn how to do this, how can you pass it on to your children? Which leads us to the 5th and final step of this communication hack when it comes to feedback. And that is this idea of commitment. The 5th step is just taking the first 4 steps. What is the verbal and non-verbal feedback? Bring awareness to it. Step 2, find out what their story is. What are they thinking? What are they feeling? Step 3, take ownership of your role in the situation. Step 4, have a conversation about it. And then step 5, make a commitment internally with yourself and externally with your partner or wife or the person you're doing this with, because you can do it with your kids or in business, and say, this is what I'm committed to. And this is where the magic happens. This is the hack in all of this. Anyone can say we're arguing too much, we're disconnected, this needs to change. Anyone can say that. But to actually make a commitment to change it and to follow through consistently, that's a different fucking story. How many times have you yelled at your children and said, I won't do that again? You felt that guilt and shame and you do it again. How many times you had an argument with your partner and you say, you won't do it again, you won't be angry, and you do it again? Most men don't change until it's too late. Their wife leaves, she takes the kids. What you do here is you say, this is what I'm taking ownership for, and this is what I'm committed to changing. And this is the hack piece. You tell your partner out loud what you're committed to doing, and now one of two things is gonna happen. You're either gonna follow through and do it, or you're not. And you get to acknowledge that there's a possibility you're not gonna do it, because you're a fucking human. I'm committed to working less hours. I'm committed to being calmer and more patient with you. I'm committed to being present. I'm committed to helping out with our daughter. These are all the things I've heard you say you want. That's the feedback I've got from you. Thank you for that. I would love for you to hold me accountable with these commitments. Like, pull me up on it if you notice me slipping. You have permission to pull me up on it. Do it in a nice way. Don't be nasty. But if you notice that I'm falling off the wagon, would you be able to, listen to the language, would you be able to hold me accountable here? And she's gonna say, yes, of course. She already does, right? Because our wives pull us up on heaps of shit. And this is where the kicker comes in. You say, I'm gonna do my best. I'm gonna do everything. I'm not gonna try, I'm gonna do it. But there's a chance I might fuck it up. And I just would love for you to be patient with me because it's gonna take time to change. Because it is. And listen to how powerful that frame of commitment is. So this is the feedback I've got from you. I understand your story. I'm taking ownership of it. We're communicating it now. This is what I'm committed to. And I would love for you to hold me accountable. And I would love for you to be understanding when I fuck it up, because I will, but I'll fuck it up less and less. Listen to how powerful that is. You're not just gonna have this conversation and go, fuck, Tony did a great podcast. Yeah, I should probably just be a better man, fix all the problems that have been going on for years. It doesn't get fixed overnight. But if you make that commitment every day and every week and you take ownership, there will be a point where you make a lasting change. This happened with Rosie and I. I told her I was gonna finish work early. I told her I was gonna stop drinking. I stopped drinking, but I kept working late. And I did it over and over again, but I'm getting better and better at doing it. And she understands it's gonna take me time because we've had that clearing conversation. And that's what communication is. It's an ongoing conversation about the rules of the game. It's an ongoing conversation about the feedback and the stories and how you feel about each other. It's an ongoing conversation about what's working and what's not working. And that's what communication is. But when you do this, you listen to the feedback your partner's giving you in every moment. You look at her facial expressions, non-verbally, her body language, how you feel in the relationship, loved, appreciated, supported, understood, respected. When you listen to the words they're saying, the tone, and you take that feedback, you find out what they're thinking and feeling, you take ownership of your role in the situation, you have conversations about it over and over again. Hey, I'm sensing some feedback from you. Is everything okay? This is how I'm feeling. And you make commitments with each other to level up and grow, the relationship explodes. This is how Rosie and I, after 8 years of being together, are still having just as much sex as before. Not every day, but once or twice a week. We feel respected and understood by each other, and we're growing together. And that makes business way easier. It makes being a father way easier. It makes my life way easier because I'm leading my partner. And when I do this, when I take ownership and I listen to the feedback and I have the conversation and I make a commitment to be better, guess what my wife does? She comes on the journey with me. And that's the best type of relationship, where I'm not only growing my wealth, but I'm growing myself and I'm growing my relationship with my partner. We're growing together. That's what relationships are about. They shouldn't get worse as you go through them. They should get better and better and better and better. And this is the strategy right there, which is understanding the feedback. That's the hack. By bringing awareness to the stories, taking ownership, making a fucking commitment in those conversations. So I hope you got some value from this communication hack. It's extremely simple, but it's not easy to do. If you have got value, make sure you give this video a thumbs up on YouTube or 5 stars on the podcast platforms, depending on where you're watching. And if you want support on how you can communicate better, how you can have a better relationship with love, appreciation, support, understanding, and respect, then there'll be a link down below where you can book a coaching session with my Empowered Man team. And on that session, it's free, there's nothing to buy. We'll literally, for 15 minutes, build out a bit of a roadmap for you at no charge on how you can communicate better and have the health, wealth, and relationships you deserve. So if you want a custom game plan, go down below right now, and I'll see you for the next episode of the Empowered Man podcast.